So, you know how you check the weather and it says sunny, but also maybe thunderstorms later?
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of what the global economy feels like right now.
Uh-huh, right.
On one hand, you have the UK's private sector, like picking up speed, hitting a 6-month high in March.
Yeah, a good sign for sure.
But then zoom out, and there's this whole thing with potential new U.S. tariffs, plus oil prices are going up thanks to these like secondary tariffs on countries that buy Venezuelan oil.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It really is. So that's what we're diving into today.
It is a really fascinating mix of stuff happening.
Right, and it seems like a bunch of random news, but it's all actually tied together by changes in global trade policy.
Exactly, and especially with April 2nd, right around the corner, we keep seeing that date pop up.
April 2nd is going to be big, yeah. So we've got like news articles, economic data, political statements, even some Bloomberg TV transcripts for this deep dive.
Wow, quite the collection.
We're going to try to make sense of it all for you. Like, what are the key takeaways from all this news?
Yes.
How could these tariffs change global trade in different industries?
Right, and what does it mean for, the overall financial situation?
Exactly. We're going to break it all down without getting too technical.
Good, I'm ready.
All right, let's start with that good news from the UK, that PMI thing, the index.
Right, the UK PMI Composite Output Index.
Yeah, so it hit 52.0 in March.
A 6-month high.
Which is great. And if you look closer, it's mostly the services sector that's driving this growth.
Yeah, they hit a 7-month peak.
So what does that tell us about the UK economy?
Well, a strong services sector usually means strong domestic demand.
So people are spending money feeling confident.
Exactly. It could mean that consumer confidence is up, or certain parts of the UK economy are doing really well internally.
That makes sense. But there's always another side to the story, right?
Always.
So while services are doing great, manufacturing is actually going in the opposite direction.
Unfortunately, yeah, their PMI dropped to a 17-month low.
That's rough. And are they saying why?
Yeah, they're saying they're facing some severe headwinds.
Severe headwinds. That sounds serious.
It does, and it's not just like general worries about the global economy either.
Oh.
They're specifically mentioning these potential U.S. tariffs as a major concern.
Really? So even though the UK is doing well internally, other countries' policies can still have a big impact.
Absolutely. And the data actually shows that manufacturing export sales are declining at the fastest rate since August 2023.
Wow. So that good news from the UK comes with some pretty big caveats.
It does. It really shows how interconnected the global economy is. What happens in one place affects others.
For sure. All right. Well, that leads us right into the main topic about President Trump's tariff announcements and this Liberation Day thing he keeps talking about.
Right. April 2nd. What is Liberation Day all about?
Yeah, can you explain that?
Well, from what I've gathered, Liberation Day seems to be about implementing these reciprocal tariffs.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly? Reciprocal tariffs.
Basically, the idea is that if another country puts tariffs on U.S. goods...
Like a tax on those goods coming in.
Exactly. Then the U.S. will put the same tariffs on goods coming from that country.
Oh, I see. So they're trying to pressure other countries to lower their trade barriers.
Right. Trump is saying that this will bring in a ton of money for the U.S.
And then what would they do with all that money?
Well, he says they could use it to lower taxes and create jobs.
That's a pretty bold claim.
It is, and there's not a lot of detail yet about how all this would work.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Sure.
Like, we know April 2nd is the date, but what countries and what products are going to be affected?
Yeah, it's still really unclear, and the analysts on Bloomberg TV were pointing out how confusing this is for everyone.
Like for businesses who are trying to plan ahead.
Right, and investors and economists, too.
So basically, nobody knows what's going to happen.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how there have been previous announcements about tariffs on cars and pharmaceuticals that never actually happened.
So it makes it even harder to predict what's going to happen this time.
Exactly.
It's like they're creating all this uncertainty.
Yeah, and sometimes the uncertainty is actually worse for the markets than the actual policies themselves.
Because nobody can plan or make decisions.
Right. It's like trying to get ready for a storm, but you don't know where it's going to hit or how strong it will be.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And then on top of all that, we have these secondary tariffs on Venezuelan oil.
Right. This is a whole different approach.
It seems like it. So these are 25% tariffs on countries that buy oil and gas from Venezuela.
And they're set to start on April 2nd as well.
So it's not a tariff on Venezuela directly. It's on the countries that import from them.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to punish other countries for doing business with Venezuela.
That's interesting. So is this a common thing to do?
It's actually pretty unusual. It's more similar to what they call secondary sanctions.
What are secondary sanctions?
It's when you try to influence a country's behavior.
Like Venezuela in this case.
Yeah, right. By restricting the actions of other countries that do business with them.
Oh, I see. So they're basically trying to isolate Venezuela economically.
That's the idea. And Trump is saying that they're doing this because Venezuela is sending criminals to the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's like a foreign policy move as well as an economic one?
Exactly. He specifically mentioned the Tren de Aragua gang, which is considered a terrorist organization.
Okay, so who are the main countries that import oil from Venezuela?
Well, the biggest one is China. They import something like 503,000 barrels per day.
That's a lot.
It is. The U.S. also imports some Venezuelan oil, and companies like Chevron have operations there.
So this could affect U.S. companies too.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have Europe and India also importing from Venezuela.
So this could have pretty wide-reaching impacts.
Definitely. It could affect energy markets and industries all over the world.
And so the cost of these tariffs would be felt by those importing countries, not Venezuela itself.
Right. That's how tariffs usually work. The companies or consumers in the country importing the goods are the ones who pay the price.
So like Chinese refineries or American drivers buying gasoline.
Exactly. They could all end up paying more.
But I've also heard about possible carve-outs, like exceptions for certain countries or companies.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely been talk about that.
So how does that work?
Well, Trump has said that he might give some countries breaks when it comes to these April 2nd tariffs.
So it's not set in stone yet.
Not at all. And this is partly why the markets haven't completely freaked out.
They're hoping that maybe they'll get an exemption.
Exactly. Like Mexico, for example. The Mexican peso actually got stronger because people think they might get a carve-out.
Interesting. So it's all very uncertain and kind of unpredictable.
It really is. And that makes it hard to know what the real impact is going to be.
Speaking of impact,
Yeah.
how have the markets been reacting to all this news?
It's been a mixed bag. There was some initial resilience, like the markets didn't totally tank.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and that seems to be because of this hope for those tariff exemptions.
So people are thinking maybe it won't be as bad as they thought.
Right. There were positive movements in stock futures in the U.S., Europe, and China.
So some cautious optimism.
Yeah, exactly.
But I imagine there are still some underlying concerns.
Definitely, especially about the U.S. economy.
Like what kinds of concerns?
Well, the S&P Global Flash U.S. PMI report shows that U.S. business confidence is declining.
So businesses aren't feeling so good about the future.
Right. They're worried about the economic outlook and the impact of the current administration's policies.
Like the tariffs.
Exactly. And business expectations for the year ahead are almost at a 2-year low.
So it's not just about the tariffs, it's a broader sense of unease.
Yeah, and this report also shows that costs are rising for U.S. companies at the fastest rate in almost 2 years.
Oh, wow. So that's going to affect their bottom line.
Definitely. And they're passing those costs on to their customers, which means higher prices for everyone.
So inflation could go up.
Exactly. And that could lead to less consumer spending, which would hurt the economy.
It's a ripple effect.
It is. And on top of that, the U.S. manufacturing PMI has dropped, which could mean a slowdown or even a recession in that sector.
And some people are saying that's because of the tariffs that are already in place.
Right. The tariff pain, as they call it.
So there are definitely some negative impacts being felt already.
There are. And it's not just limited to the U.S. either. It's affecting how other countries view the situation as well.
Like, what are they saying?
Well, for example, the chairman of Standard Chartered suggested that London might actually benefit from all this.
Wow, how so?
He thinks that because London is seen as a neutral financial hub, businesses might move their operations there to avoid the uncertainty caused by trade wars.
Oh, that's interesting. So it could create opportunities for some countries.
Yeah, it's like a silver lining for London in this whole mess.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are other countries that are not so happy about this situation.
Absolutely. Like foreign investors are getting hit pretty hard by the U.S. stock market downturn and the weakening dollar.
Yeah, that's going to make them think twice about investing in the U.S.
For sure. And then there's the Irish government. They're worried about losing up to 80,000 jobs if there's a trade war between the U.S. and the EU.
Wow, that's a huge number.
It is. And the governor of the Central Bank of Ireland called this scenario extremely concerning. He said it could lead to higher prices, job losses, and slower economic growth.
So there are some serious potential consequences for other countries.
Definitely. It's not just a U.S. issue anymore. It's a global one.
And Canada and Mexico are kind of in a holding pattern right now with those tariffs.
Yeah, the tariffs on goods under the USMCA agreement have been paused until April 2nd.
So they get a little break for now.
Yeah, but it's not clear exactly which products are covered by this pause.
So there's still some uncertainty there.
Definitely. And some of the retaliatory measures that were being considered, like that electricity surcharge in Ontario, might still happen.
So the tension is still there.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It really does seem like April 2nd is the day to watch.
Absolutely. That's when a lot of these changes are supposed to take effect.
But we also know that President Trump has hinted at some flexibility with those tariffs.
Right. He said he might give some countries breaks.
So there's still a chance things could change.
Definitely. And that's something to keep in mind as we move closer to April 2nd.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say are the key things people should take away from all of this?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that the global trade landscape is incredibly complex and constantly changing.
Especially with the U.S. kind of calling the shots.
Right. And there's the potential for both disruption and opportunity.
Yeah. Some sectors might get hit hard, while others might actually benefit.
Exactly. And it's all going to depend on how these policies play out.
And it's that contrast that really stands out to me. We have the UK doing well in some areas, but struggling in others.
And we have market optimism mixed with deep concern about the future.
It's like we're all just waiting to see what happens next. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it for today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll be back soon with more deep dives into the news that matters.
See you next time.
Bye.